Hey there, so thanks a lot for tuning in for part two of my story. And before we get started on the story itself, I wanted to start off by saying everyone in my family of origin, all of my siblings and both of my parents, were all Jehovah's Witnesses in the beginning. And my father and mother were Gilead intended. When my mother had four little babies within 5 years, three little boys and one little girl. Of course, she wasn't a regular pioneer at that time, but my father was still an elder. And so the stories that I'm about to tell you have to do with my memory of growing up in that household. And so my older two brothers wanted to be, and they were, ministerial servants in the congregation, and then they were appointed as elder because my dad had set that up for them. My younger brother never wanted to be an elder or anything like that. So good job, Raj. And then my sister was baptized at a very, very young age. I don't want to say it for sure, but I think I have a memory of her being baptized like when she was 9 or something like that, which is sort of typical of the whole Jehovah's Witness lifestyle. But as I tell the stories of my memories of the fights that my mom and dad engaged in, all of this was while they were always in good standing, and my father was always an elder during this time, and their fights took place, and they were the most volatile when we were driving to the Kingdom Hall or getting ready for that, or driving to an assembly. We had different types of assemblies several times a year, and then we had conventions. And so all of this was always associated with worship. So very unholy behavior to be exhibiting around your children when you want them to grow up and worship in the way that you do. So here's my story. We were in the Haltom congregation in Fort Worth, and my dad, of course, was very, very busy in the congregation. But what I remember the most is that he and my mother fought all the time. I do have a memory before I think we actually went to Fort Worth. I remember being in the car with my brother, my younger brother, and he's not younger than me, but youngest of the three, with him and my sister, and my parents screaming at each other driving to Fort Worth. And I remember my mother threatening to open the door if he didn't and jump out of the car if he didn't listen to her. And I remember she opened the door, and I remember screaming and being like in the floorboard of the back seat. That was way before seat belts or anything like that. But we were terrified of what my dad might allow her to do or what she would actually do. But it really intensified when my brother moved out and my sister had moved out and gotten married. The fighting really intensified, and so it was really, really hard for me because I didn't have anybody to say, is this going to be okay? It was just me, either right in the room with them as they were fighting, and feeling like as the little kid I was having to break up these adults from doing that. And I do remember on many occasions throughout the years my mother threatening to leave my father, and I remember wishing that she would, and because I just wanted peace. And I remember on many occasions my mother would take her clothes off and say, if you don't pay attention to me, Maxie, I will walk outside and find someone who will. And of course he would call her crazy, and she was, but she was made crazy. And so much of it could have just been prevented if my dad could just be her husband and my dad, and not be away with all of the elders meetings and judicial committee meetings and, building other kingdom halls and things like that. So it was really hard being the only kid left there with any of that. And so I looked forward to any time that any of my siblings were going to come visit. My oldest brother and his wife had a baby, and that baby, oh, he was my baby. I loved Jeffrey. He meant everything to me. I even wrote a song about him. It was based on, this was funny. My brother Raj was a music buff, and I guess it was him who introduced me to the Carpenters. I don't know. I mean, I don't remember an awful lot about music other than musicals, because my middle brother was quite flamboyant and fabulous, and he loved musicals. But I think it was Roger that I listened to the Carpenters, and there was a song on there that was instrumental, and I wrote lyrics about Jeffrey because he just meant everything to me. And they were going to move. My eldest brother and his wife went to go visit California, and they were going to move, and I was mortified because I felt like he was what I lived for in those days. And when they would come to visit, I would be so happy because Mom and Dad would start fighting for a little bit. And then my middle brother and his wife, they lived several different places. He was an Arabian horse trainer, and they had a little baby girl too, and that was super special for me. And then my sister had a baby, and I got to go and stay with her, and my mom was taking care of her in those first couple of weeks, and I got to go and stay with them, and so he was my baby too. Then my youngest brother and his wife moved from Abilene back to Haltom City, and they had a little daughter, and that was Vanessa, and she lived close by, and I got to see her practically every day. And she was just a little doll baby, and that meant so much to me. So time when my siblings showed up, that was my respite from the fighting and from the crazy making that my parents engaged in so much. So, for reasons, my sister left. She left her husband, she left Jehovah's Witnesses, she left Texas, and it broke my heart. I was really mortified, and I think that's when I first started seriously losing time. My mother was so distraught, and she would mourn and cry, and it was unbelievably awful. I remember being in the 7th grade, and I was in middle school, and I would go to the payphone in the hallway, and there was a hanging phone book there, and I would look up how to call the area where I thought my sister lived, and I would call information, and I would look for anybody with her name, and I would save my allowance, and I would put money in, and I would call places. I don't even remember who I would call, but I knew that she was working for some sort of modeling agency, and I was looking for her everywhere, and I wanted to talk to her, and I don't know what I would have said if I had found her, but I knew that she was a person who knew the crazy that I was living in. I knew that she was my big sister, and that she would believe me of all of the things that were happening at home with Mom and Dad. And I don't know if I just would have asked her to please come home, or I don't know if I would have asked her if I could have come to her, but I lost chunks of time in that year of 7th grade, and things were really, really hard at home. I can just say that it was really sad. And it was already, going into middle school is already a big transition. And going into middle school and, the big city was a big transition. And I wasn't allowed to do all the things that the girls in school were allowed to do. They were in pep squad, and I wanted to be in pep squad so bad. I wasn't allowed to go to the pep rallies, which was a big deal now in middle school, and I wanted to do that, and I would secretly buy ribbons, spirit ribbons, and I would wear them on my shirt during the day, but I'd have to take them off before I went home. I couldn't let my parents know that I was participating in that. But during the pep rallies, I had to go to the library because I was different. I was always different. And those of you who were Jehovah's Witnesses or still are, you know that that's what's expected. You're expected to be different. And I got really, really good at being different. So that's it for now, because I'm needing to kind of go process this all myself. But thanks for listening. Thanks for your kind words to me. I really hope that this story, as I continue to tell it, will continue to resonate with some of you. And if you're not out yet, I will tell you, gosh, it's so worth it to get out. There is a better life out here. I wish I had discovered it before I was 53 years old. I've just spent the last year of my life discovering what it is like to not have to be different. And I'm so glad that I have this community to be able to share this with. Thanks, guys. It means a lot. Here we go.